Welcome. This is going to be a review of Passions and Virtues, a part of the spiritual counsels of Saint Paisios the Athonite. Saint Paisios was, of course, a very recent saint, probably one of the best and most well-known saints in recent times, especially, who lived on Mount Athos, a place where I had the privilege to visit not so long ago and actually got to visit the very little home where Saint Paisios lived. Massive experience, and I'll show you the picture during this video as well. But this is going to be talking about the book here. I actually have the whole series of 5 books so far. I think there's one more coming as far as I understand. You can see them just there. There's the other 4 that I have. I've only read 2 of them so far. This is the second one that I've dived into. The first one that I read was on family life. I actually read it twice. And these books are not books that you just kind of like read through in one shot, but they're really read best kind of a little bit of a nibble at a time, a little piece, because there's a lot to them. They're broken up into kind of little sections with questions and answers, and there's a lot to digest there as well. So as I said, on family life, I read it twice. It probably was on my bedside table for at least 6 months or something like that. This one probably took about 3 months to get through. Just reading a little bit every single day. It's really the way that I would recommend reading these books, not trying to get through them all. But I will say this, that the more that I read from the Saint Paisios, the more that I really come to absolutely love that man. You can really sense his person, his history as a soldier in the Greek army, fighting against Nazis and Italian occupiers in Greece, and just a real manly spirit, if ever, that I've noticed in an Orthodox monk. A really powerful life story and inspiration for men today. So I can't really explain like what it's been to. Yeah, I don't think I can, I don't think I can overestimate what it's meant to be encountered his work, reading it, and even to be able to go and visit his home and to venerate his icon inside his home on Mount Athos. But I have a small icon actually in my phone, which I carry with me at all times, which I received when I was there on the island. It's this one right over here, and it's kept in the little pocket of my phone. So I have them with me there. Quite a privilege to have that there. So yeah, if you haven't read the life story, the biography of Saint Paisios first, I really recommend reading one of them. There's several. I think the Saint John the Evangelist or John the Theologian Hesychasterion in Greece, which he established, has published. It's them that published these books. They've also done a life story, one of his autobiographies, but there's several other ones as well. I think the most accessible one is called something like The Guru, the Young Man, and the Elder, Saint Paisios, and I think that's I've actually owned that one, but I haven't read it myself yet. It's on my list, and I'll be getting to it sometime sooner or later. I think my wife's busy reading it as well right now. But I think reading a life story first before you go into spiritual counsels are really good to understand the man himself and his background, and then you can start digging into his spiritual teachings. So yeah, I'd say that this book here, The Passions and Virtues, is by far the most accessible one that I read out of the. I've started on a third one now, which is With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, and it's really great. I mean, especially the first section on the passions really gave an excellent overview of the way that the passions work and how they're related to each other and what the roots and the causes of them are. I would compare it a little bit to some of the other work that I've read, such as The Ladder of Divine Ascent by St. John Climacus. And also some of the stuff that I've read from, I think from St. Maximus the Confessor, has similar kind of overviews and delving into understanding the passions and the virtues and their kind of like hierarchical relationship there is between them. The thing about Saint Paisios, of course, is that he's not a learned academic man in any way whatsoever. Very simple man, and so writes in a very simple and easy to understand way. And so I especially think for us non-monastics, I definitely read The Ladder of Divine Ascent when I wasn't really ready for that, and for normal lay people, I think that Saint Paisios is a really great entrance into understanding these things. So what I want to do is to first of all just read a first little text from the struggle against the passions. It's the first chapter of the book to get us into it. And then I'm going to go a little bit through the overview of the book and the different contents of the chapters. So hopefully you can follow with me here and read, and I'll just read up this. This is from page 21, but it's where the book starts. And I'm going to read from halfway down the page where it says, Geroda, this is the name that the nuns who are asking him questions call him. And this is the way the whole book follows this kind of form. Geronda, what are the passions? I see the passions as powers of the soul. God does not grant weaknesses. He grants powers. But when we do not exercise these powers for what is good, then the devil comes to exploit them, and they become passions. And afterwards we complain and blame God. On the other hand, if we exercise these powers against evil, they will help us in the spiritual struggle. For instance, anger indicates that the soul possesses manliness, which helps in the spiritual life. One who is not hot-tempered and lacks manliness won't be able to easily put his self or his ego into place. If an irascible or angry person utilizes the power or this power of his in the spiritual life, he's like a car racing steadily on a straight road. But if this power is not properly utilized, then one leaves himself unrestrained. Then he's like a car spinning out of control on rough terrain. One has to become aware of his powers and utilize them for what is good. This is how we can attain, with the help of God, a good spiritual state. Egoism, for example, should be turned against the devil so that one does not succumb to temptations. The tendency to loquaciousness, talking a lot, ought to be sanctified by cultivating the Jesus prayer. Isn't it better to talk with Christ and be sanctified rather than to chatter away and sin? In other words, one can become good or bad depending on how he will utilize the powers of his soul. So, yeah, this is what I love about St. Paisios. Certainly a masculine approach to spirituality, where he really sees people. In some places, he's incredibly conservative, surprisingly so, and very, very strict, but also very much including the whole human being. And that's a really beautiful thing to see and experience in it. So, well, I have here the contents of the book, and it's really just been a journey for me over months of reading it and seeing how these different themes are reflected in your life. And so it's hard to kind of sum things up and go into detail with them. But it's like, you know, we often talk about the lack of spiritual fathers and the lack of men that we can lean up and use in role models and examples. And I think having this book with you and reading these little parts and comparing them and implementing them in your life, it's really like, you know, having a journey of seeing your life through the eyes of a wise elder. And so it's a real blessing to be able to have this book, and talks into very much everyday struggles of normal life. And so, yeah, it's really underlined by St. Paisios how this goal of struggling towards sainthood, overcoming the passions, is the path to unification with God, and nothing else can be more valuable and a better way to use your time. And so, of course, the part one is about the source of the passions, which is self-love. And St. Paisios defines self-love as slavery. It's an incorrect application of the concept of love towards oneself. It's like a kind of like a short-circuiting of that. And of course, the problem with this slavery is that it binds oneself to the passions of ourselves. And St. Paisios is really talking about a man who had explored these themes very, very much so in his own life in a very experiential way. So he knew a lot about it. He connected the root of self-love to pride. It's the most hidden, of course. The part about judgment, which comes down here in part 3, really came up in my life, where I was really trying to understand, like, you know, there's this saying, there's this verse in the Bible, of course, where Christ said, you know, judge not, yes, lest ye be judged. And so understanding what it means to still have discernment as a Christian, and to be able to be honest about, things that are bad for you and for others when you see them. And especially if you have a family or other people that you're responsible for, then you need to often be clear about what's right and what's wrong. And so it was really helpful to get this understanding from Saint Paisios and understand how we are called to have discernment, how we are called to be able to see what's right and what's not right, but at the same time, this tendency to look negatively and interpret the actions of other people without really understanding them as a kind of distraction from dealing with our own weaknesses and our own shortcomings, or often just through envy of seeing what they're doing and wishing that we could be doing the same thing as well. And so it's really illuminating for me to be reading those chapters slowly and going through them in my life. The next part is about envy, anger, and sorrow and the roles of those in my life. For me, absolutely. I think I've noticed anger is definitely where I have my challenges. And so being able to channel anger, as we read in that first passage, is an incredibly valuable thing. Okay, good. The cultivation of virtues. I actually have another little text on virtues, which I'm going to read up. It comes up over here. So this is very much the take that, again, Saint Paisios wasn't saying anything that he hadn't experienced himself. And so his teaching on the virtues was focused on this idea of theosis, which is quite unique to the Orthodox Church. It's about the unification with God of the human being in this lifetime. Saint Athanasius, he said that God became man so that man become God. And so that is really the aim of all of this work. And this is the natural goal and target of the practice of the virtues. And so read up here. Gerunda, when does one reach theosis? When divine grace abides within him. Does he then have joy in his heart? Not only does he have joy in his heart, he is also filled with immense love, humility, consolation, certainty. He has the attributes of God, and that is why the divine grace of God abides in him. Gerunda, what does God of gods mean? This is a quote from Psalm 50. Ye are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High. Isn't this what David says? Man is created in the image of God. Therefore, God is God of gods, that is, of human beings. Man must be deified. All human beings are created in the image of God. But how many of us are in the process of becoming in the likeness of God? So this is a fundamental Orthodox teaching that in Genesis, of course, we read that man is created in the image and likeness of God. And so the image means that we share this spark of divinity, if you will, with God, that's inherent with us. And no matter who we are or where we go in our life, that's present in every single human being, no matter what they do. But at the same time, our likeness is very far from God in our sinful state. And so as we're able to cultivate the virtues within ourselves, then more and more we become inheritors of the likeness of God as well. So that's the being and the becoming. The image is the being, and the becoming is the likeness of God. So he continues, the more we distance ourselves from God, the less we resemble God. The more we distance ourselves from God, the less we resemble God. That is, the more we distance ourselves from his likeness. For one to resemble God, we must live according to the commandments of God, working diligently on himself. This is how one is cleansed of the passions and acquires virtues. Then he will not be merely in the image of God, but will continue on to being in the likeness of God, since the grace of God is active within him. So, yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail about all the details of these are the chapters here that we have for the virtues. About, of course, humility is the opposite of self-love and pride. This is the singular virtue that is the root of all the other ones. And then I'll just mention as well that there's this philotimo that Saint Paisios uses all the time. He talks about nobility, the majesty of God, and then philotimo. And it's this kind of like manly struggle, as the way at least that I read it, with love and sacrifice and good restlessness and agony for the good fight is the last chapter that he uses there. These are all these elements that I think are very good at summing up the kind of approach to the spiritual life that Saint Paisios puts forward to us, and that is an excellent example for men to be following. So yeah, that was it. Very difficult to put forward the deep ideas in this book, of course. So that was just a very superficial little introduction. I highly recommend Passions and Virtues, a great book to read. If you're a family man, then start with On Family Life. That's great. The book that I'm reading now with Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, probably more, it seems to be more, it's written for people who kind of grew up in the Orthodox faith, but aren't really actively practicing it. At least that's my experience so far with it. So I think these ones have gone deeper into the kinds of daily challenges that for a man who's already, moving into the Orthodox faith, maybe especially if you're a convert like yourself, and you've kind of made that decision that this is an important thing and you want to be putting effort and time into it. And so that seems like a better place to start than with the first volume in the series. Okay, thanks.